Tonight, Trump's controversial pick for acting attorney general, and controversy may be putting it mildly. Donald Trump jumping the line of succession and may have broken the law just to put a critic of the Mueller probe in charge of the Mueller investigation. We're going to show you what Matt Whitaker has said about that probe and discuss with a Congresswoman, Liz Holtzman, who sat on the House Judiciary Committee during Watergate. Then, Trump's latest unhinged press gaggle. We're going to review what the president had to say because it is stunning. We'll correct some, if not all, of what he got wrong, and we'll check the latest election results as well. And later, a group that's helping prisoners not only stay out of prison, but also get a roof over their heads. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to RFL. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Richard French. Now, the Trump Justice Department, it's been a quagmire of controversy, let's just put it honestly, since the moment Trump became president. Now, 2 years after his inauguration, the chain of command there is as confused as it has ever been. And there is a ton at stake at justice as we speak. That is where Robert Mueller and his Russia probe lives. So the person that President Trump has running the department now could also control the fate and future of that critical investigation. Until Wednesday, the top man at the Justice Department had obviously been the Attorney General Jeff Sessions. But Trump, he gave him the boot on Wednesday, ordering him to resign and not even letting him finish the week as he had requested. One Trump canned Sessions. Once that happened, the job, it should have gone to Sessions' number 2, Rod Rosenstein, best known as the man directly overseeing Mueller after Sessions had recused himself. But Rosenstein is something of a wild card for Trump. So Trump decided he'd bypass Rosenstein and named this guy, Matt Whitaker, as acting AG. Whitaker was a political appointee at Justice. He was Sessions' chief of staff, by all accounts, basically somebody that was a spy to be put in Justice to keep an eye on what was going on. It's a job that did not require confirmation by the Senate, throwing the validity of his elevation to acting AG into serious doubt. Not that the president has any doubt, of course, but I want you to listen carefully as the president discussed the Whitaker appointment just this morning.
I don't know Matt Whitaker. Matt Whitaker worked for Jeff Sessions, and he was always extremely highly thought of, and he still is, but I didn't know Matt Whitaker.
That's interesting, considering that Trump says he doesn't know Whitaker. And the question is he trying to distance himself now from his appointee, who is generating more controversy than the White House expected? Now, that denial from Trump today, even more curious, considering that Trump said this about Whitaker in an interview just last month.
In the Washington Post this morning, it says that you talked to the Attorney General's chief of staff about replacing the Attorney General. Apparently, according to the Post, you talked to Matthew Whitaker, but the conversation was nebulous, they depicted as. It wasn't clear whether you wanted him to replace him on an interim basis or he would be nominated on a more permanent basis. Anything to that story?
Well, I never talk about that, but I can tell you Matt Whitaker is a great guy. I mean, I know Matt Whitaker, but I never talk about conversations that I had.
So I know Matt Whitaker, and this morning, who's Matt Whitaker? Okay, but the process, how and why Trump picked Whitaker, less worrisome right now than what Whitaker might do with the power the president has just granted him. Whitaker, best described as a Trump and GOP loyalist, has also expressed a ton of doubts about the Mueller probe or the questions surrounding possible collusion or Russian interference even in the 2016 election that every intelligence agency all agrees they did. Since Whitaker is now technically in charge of Mueller and that probe, his very public comments on it are worth a critical review. This morning, President Trump's new acting attorney general under fire for previously criticizing the very investigation he now oversees. Matthew Whitaker taking over at the Department of Justice after Jeff Sessions was ousted in the hours after Election Day. And now, the one-time conservative commentator's past comments are coming back to haunt him.
The truth is, there was no collusion with the Russians in the Trump campaign.
Last year, in a series of radio interviews, Whitaker bashed Robert Mueller's Russia probe.
There is not a single piece of evidence that demonstrates that the Trump campaign had any illegal or even improper relationships with Russians. But it's that simple.
On the question of obstruction by President Trump,
if all he did was make a mere suggestion and not an outright command, I don't think that rises to the level.
Couldn't have been the same.
He also called Mueller's appointment, quote, ridiculous, and he said it, quote, smells a little fishy, end quote.
I just hope it doesn't turn into a fishing expedition, because I will be one of the ones jumping up and down.
Good for you, yeah.
Making sure that limitations on this investigation continue, because that's the way it's supposed to be.
And he forcefully defended President Trump.
It is not helping this administration and really not helping the federal government generally to have the president and his associates under the cloud of a federal investigation. I mean, it is very hard.
Unlike Sessions, sources say that Whitaker will not recuse himself from overseeing the Russia probe, something that has Democrats outraged.
I think he has a clear conflict of interest in terms of overseeing any part of the Mueller investigation.
And it's not just on Capitol Hill. Last night, protesters around the country, from New York to Chicago to the White House, calling on Whitaker to step aside. But inside the White House, sources say Whitaker could be on the short list to permanently lead the Justice Department, a list that also includes at least a half a dozen other political supporters, like the president's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, former New Jersey governor and current ABC contributor Chris Christie, Senator Lindsey Graham, and Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi. So for more, we turn to the perfect guest for this conversation, former Congresswoman Liz Holtzman. Holtzman served on the House Judiciary Committee from 73 to 81 and was there at the height of Watergate during the 1974 impeachment hearings of President Richard Nixon. Also, she is the author of the new book, The Case for Impeaching Trump, which comes out this coming Monday. Congresswoman Holtzman, thank you so much for joining us. I want to get right to and I'll give you kind of a Chinese menu option of the problems that I've heard as it relates to the acting AG, Mr. Whitaker. One is, as you heard, all the comments that he made that clearly show a conflict of interest. The other thing is, when we're looking at his prior comments, nothing to do with the Mueller probe, he says that all judges should have a biblical view of justice, that basically you need to defer to the holy book when parsing out the law. He also says that the worst court decision was, get this, Marbury versus Madison, which is the basic foundation principle of the Constitution. So there's the argument that he's not qualified. And then finally, there's a legal argument that I'm hearing a lot of smart people say to me, Rich, this isn't even constitutional, appointing this guy, skipping over, obviously, Rosenstein. He shouldn't even be able, even if he was the greatest jurist, which nobody argues who is, he shouldn't be AG just by virtue of that. I know you're not a fan of the guy, but of the three options I listed, which one gets to the top of the list as to your issues with him?
I'm not going to pick. They all suggest a man who is, one, unfit, unqualified, injudicious. Ruth Marcus, a top columnist at the Washington Post, called him a crackpot. I think that's a very good term for him. And you cannot put someone in charge of an investigation who is determined to derail it and who has opposed it from the get-go. That's not what American justice is about. We have a figure who's a blindfolded figure holding two scales. Why is the figure blindfolded, mythological figure? Because you don't want to favor one side or another. The whole purpose of having the Mueller investigation was to have an impartial, thorough investigation. If the president is exonerated at the end of it, great. If he's not exonerated, also great. We need to know the truth. But you can't have someone putting a finger on the scales, which is what this guy was put in the position of Attorney General, acting Attorney General, to do. I go back to Watergate. This was the central defining moment of Richard Nixon's downfall. When the special prosecutor was trying to get White House tapes that Richard Nixon made of his conversations in the White House, and Richard Nixon, the president, said, "Oh no, you can't investigate me in that way. You can't do that, and I'm going to get you fired, and I'm going to install my own special prosecutor." American people said, "No, we're not a banana republic. We're a country of the rule of law," and they rose up and they forced Congress to take action. That's what needs to happen now. We have a president who puts someone in charge of the Justice Department in order to shut down this investigation, in order for the president to control who's investigating him. That's not how it works in America. You have an independent, impartial, objective investigation. And so it's not going to, the American people have to say, this is not what we want.
You know, I saw Senator McConnell today say it's unimaginable that Mueller, that the probe would be shut down. I think beyond naive, we still haven't seen the Senate give the protections to the Mueller probe to make it bulletproof in this. But let's play along with my hypothetical that he put in, obviously, Whitaker because he's worried that there's more indictments coming down the pike and he thinks it's Mueller's nearing the end. And this is why. And now he's going to do it. And that's why he frog-walked Sessions out of the office on Wednesday. If he goes ahead and
it's
they
not
take
a
dramatic,
hypothetical.
I know, you're right. So my question to you is, who plays referee at that point if there's questions about the legitimacy of Whitaker? Who decides whether or not constitutionally he has the right to oversee the probe?
Well, I think that's really the key question here because the issue is he acting unconstitutionally because he's serving without having been confirmed by the Senate? Rosenstein would have been a Senate confirmation, someone who had been confirmed by the Senate. Is he acting improperly because he's got a huge conflict of interest? Can we have a situation in which a president decides who's going to investigate him and controls that investigation? So they're very profound constitutional issues and issues about the very foundations of our country. So the question is, who decides this? I guess there are possibilities that a lawsuit could be brought. Who would have the standing to bring such a lawsuit? Obviously, Mueller would, maybe members of the Senate whose right to give advice and consent to the president has been ignored, denied, overruled. Maybe people who will be affected by any ruling that Whitaker makes, it could be void and illegal. So we have a very serious situation where we have someone sitting as the head of the Justice Department, signing various orders, making various decisions, all of which might be unconstitutional. This needs to be resolved right away. Personally, I think he ought to step down, not recuse himself, step down.
You know, I know I've heard you say that this is bringing back some bad memories of Watergate. To me, and tell me, please, if you think I'm overhyping this, tell me to cool my jets. But to me, the Founding Fathers had a basic idea that we had co-equal branches of government. They didn't want another king in place here. So we had checks and balances. The idea was that a president was not to be ever above the law, that he wasn't or she wasn't going to be able to allow as to decide by themselves if they were or weren't going to be investigated or to be held to account. That's really what's at stake now, right? I'm not exaggerating this.
Correct. This is the fundamentals of our democracy are at stake here. Is the president above the law, or is the president just on the same plane as the law? In other words, can he decide who's going to investigate him, and by doing that, basically curtail the investigation into himself and his friends and his family? Is that the kind of country we want? That's the kind of country you find in dictatorships, in autocracies, all over the world. America was a shining city on the hill for the world in terms of a democratic system governed by the rule of law. And here we have a president who's thumbing his nose at the American people, at the Constitution, at our history as a constitutional democracy, and saying, I am above the law and you can't touch me. Well, the American people are the ones who can force Congress to act and force this man out of this position. He's no business being there.
Well, talk about perfect timing. Seemingly every week, the argument of your book has got more merit. Again, the book coming out Monday, The Case for Impeaching Trump. Liz Holtzman, thank you so much, Congresswoman. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And quickly now, we turn to a developing story. The Wall Street Journal, again, Murdoch's paper, right? They're out with a report today directly linking President Trump to the process that led to the payouts for a number of women who accused him of having affairs with them, then buying the silence of the women. The Journal says federal officials have evidence that proves it. It would be an illegal campaign contribution, one that Trump has repeatedly on the record denied. We're going to have much more on this story on Monday as it percolates. Okay, coming up next, though, someone get this man a lifesaver or a lollipop or even a puppy. The president He meets the press on his way to Paris, and the wheels came off. If you didn't see this train wreck, you have to. The lies, the insults, the anger, the president. We're going to fact check what he had to say straight ahead.